So, my last YouTube video, why you've been wasting your time learning piano technique, seems to have been a little bit controversial. Most people got it, and there were some really positive comments. Thank you very much for all of those. Thank you for all the comments. But there were also some intensely negative comments. My God, some of you really did not hold back. Without technique, you can't play harder pieces. No technique will keep you at a very basic level. Shaking my head in disbelief. This video is from a psychiatric hospital for patients. So I obviously really need to make some clarifications as to what I was saying, as quite a few people really seem to have very much missed the point of what I was saying in the video. So here's a couple of comments that I definitely want to reply to. Without technique, you can't play harder pieces. No technique will keep you at a very basic level. Shaking my head in disbelief. And this is the greatest load of crap I have ever heard. Don't discourage people from developing technique. It will carry you through when all else fails. This thing of being able to visual things will in time just come. Why don't you just delete this one and have another go in case you really do have something worthwhile to say? Please don't pursue the tennis analogy. It is just silly. So, okay, in answer to that, let me just play you the opening few seconds of that video. Here are the opening few seconds of that video. Hello, welcome to the Heart of the Piano YouTube channel. I'm Bob Rose. If you're watching this video, you are probably wasting your time learning piano technique. But that's a very bold claim, obviously. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique. Exactly. Let me repeat that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn piano technique, but that there are other things that need to be in place. Otherwise, it's going to be completely wasted. And also, I said really similar things throughout that video, like this. Then the technique is useful. And I want to make it really clear. As a teacher, I absolutely teach technique. I totally teach technique. I teach advanced technique. I teach nitty-gritty technique. And this. Now, this doesn't mean that you never study technique or you never think about technique or work on your technique when you're playing golf. But when it matters, you need to be thinking about the goal of your actions, not the mechanics of how you do it. So, yes, okay, the title of that last video, yes, it was obviously a little bit clickbaity, but only a little bit, because I really do believe that most adults are spinning their wheels trying to learn traditional technique. And also, you know, I've been making videos with some really good content, with people leaving great comments. People weren't watching them. So I'm sorry, this is kind of what works on YouTube. But you know, like I was saying, it's only a little bit, because I actually do believe that this is true, that most amateur adult learners are falling into the traps that I explained in that video. You know, I don't like using titles like this, but then it is a very tough balance, as such few people were watching the videos because YouTube just wasn't promoting them. But as I showed you just now, I did not ever say that technique is not important. So I hope I'm clarifying that. So then I was chatting with Ben Richards, who runs loads of piano meetup groups around the UK. And when I was sort of chatting with him, what am I going to make my next video where I try and answer some of these things? He said, he suggested, "You'll be shocked by the comments," as another clickbait title. So you can blame Ben for the title of this video if you don't like it. So what is technique? What is it? Surely technique is how we physically use our bodies to make music. That's what it is. So much of what I talked about in that video, especially including the stuff to do with interoception, is about how we use our bodies to make music. This is technique. That's what it is. So part 2 of Leaps and Jumps, which I'm going to be launching at the same time as this video, uploading, that's going to talk more about this, especially the very first section, which talks about the importance of experimenting with all the different parts of our bodies at the piano, which is the opposite of what I find most of my adult students usually do. and they don't do these things because of all the things I spoke about in the video. So very, very quickly, I talk about all the different ways that we can move playing the piano from our fingertip joint, the next fingertip joint, then the metacarpal joint, then the thumb also has those same amount of joints. And how we then have several motions of the wrist. It can go up and down. It can move laterally side to side like that. It can rotate, although strictly speaking, this is not actually the wrist rotating, it's actually the forearm. But I like to kind of talk about it being in the wrist because it feels like it's in the wrist. It's actually the forearm, but I don't want to get into that. Then there's the elbow, and the elbow moves on several axes, and then there's your shoulder joint, and so on and so on, you know. And when you look at all the different ways in which you can move all these things, I find that what my students generally do is they sit there and they play over and over and over again in exactly the same way without experimenting with all of these different things. They're just moving their finger joints. And as I'll mention later in this video, I talk about this in some of my other recent videos on technique. I teach technique. But as I was saying, if you don't have certain things in place, you're going to waste learning that technique. That's what I was saying. So I do also talk about technique a lot with my students in the more traditional sense of technique. And this is that ideally we let our bodies work out the most relaxed and the most efficient ways to create expressive and effective music. So most of my students, and I generally teach adult amateurs, I teach people at a high level as well, but generally most of my students are adult amateurs. And when they are tense, what I say, which I think is the most useful way of putting it across, is that good technique is the laziest way to get the sound that you want. Which kind of means the same thing, that you're relaxed and that everything is efficient. And I think most people will agree with that. So traditional teaching of traditional technique is a way to learn a whole load of combinations of movements and strategies that people have kind of worked out before us. So, for example, when I teach violin really does require technique. You absolutely need to have violin technique because it's so complicated. If you try to learn from scratch and try to by yourself intuitively work out all the combinations of movements that result in you being super relaxed and making a beautiful sound, you're not going to find it on a violin. So a violin is different. And people before us, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. You know, I can talk about all the best practices for holding the bow, for holding your violin up. But when it comes to the piano is not quite so tricky. You're not on such a knife edge on a lot of different combinations of movements where they all have to happen just so. So often when I teach technique, what I'm actually doing is I'm reverse engineering the things that I personally have discovered that work for me, because no two concert pianists play with exactly the same technique. So I show people what works for me, but I also encourage people to take that and adapt it and figure out how they can do subtle, nuanced things that maybe work better for them. This is important. I pretty much discovered my technique by experimenting with my body to find the ways of making difficult things feel easier. And that's another, I think, great definition of good technique. It's the ways of making difficult things feel easier. So, you know, all my life, I've been told I've got good technique. And this is, you know, one of the reasons I'm always really, really wanting to learn very challenging and ambitious pieces. And so with every single piece that I'm learning, I approach it with an attitude of, well, how hard can this be? If other people on the planet are playing it, how hard can it be? It is possible. And then I experiment with the physicality of how I play it until I discover the combinations of things that minimizes the things that make it feel difficult, or how I most easily get the sound and expression that I want. So, you know, you're welcome to check out my YouTube performance videos because, yeah, who am I? If you've not seen my videos before, who is this guy pontificating at you on YouTube, you know? So go watch my videos if you want to see, you know, do I have decent technique or not. So, I recently uploaded some of the Rachmaninoff Second Piano Sonata. That's generally acknowledged as one of the most technically difficult piano pieces. I want to make it clear, I'm not saying that to show off, but because I want to show you my approach works. So when I started getting really heavily into teaching piano, I discovered that all the methods that I was developing to teach traditional technique to my students, they really did have a huge and uncanny amount of overlap with the most common methods used by top-level classical teachers and pedagogues. And I basically noticed this by starting to watch YouTube videos by other teachers. This is after I'd kind of already developed the way that I was teaching, going to a lot of masterclasses, all this kind of stuff. So, the reason for this overlap is because of the common goal that everybody has in paying attention to our bodies to find the most relaxed and the most efficient ways to use our bodies to create the sound that we want. So here's another comment to the last video that I want to reply to. Technique is the first thing you teach on the piano. It starts with correct posture, arm and wrist relaxation, exercises for finger independence. That, by the way, that's very controversial, but anyway. These are just the fundamental piano skills, aka technique, which are crucial in playing piano. With those set correctly, scales and arpeggios won't be a problem. There is no way avoiding learning proper technique and expect to play good, because you can even teach a monkey to press the keys, but to play beautifully, you need technique. Just like the tennis example, if you want the ball to shoot at a certain angle and distance, you need the technique to achieve it. I think, again, has been missed the point so much of what, but anyway. Otherwise, there is no control of the ball, no control in the music you're playing, no control of your hands and fingers. To address some of that, I have to say, in my opinion, that this notion of correct technique can be incredibly harmful. Who has decided what technique is correct? What is the point of it? For most adult amateurs, this approach to correct technique can result in more tension rather than less. For example, in an episode on my podcast, I spoke about self-determination theory. This includes a huge amount of scientific research on the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And I'm not going to really go into it now. You can go watch that episode for more information. But basically, in essence, this theory shows that intrinsic motivation, doing something because it's inherently rewarding, leads to better performance than extrinsic motivation, like practicing technique for its own sake. There's so many studies that show that it is counterproductive. To treat technique as an extrinsic goal in itself will result in far worse performance than when there is an intrinsic purpose for it. So, it is too much to go into in this video, but I do recommend that podcast episode where me and the student chat about it and put it into practice in her playing in that particular podcast episode. So there will be a link in the description below if you want to check that out. Now, the point of technique is to help us express ourselves and make music. Technique should never be a goal in itself. If we can physically move in the most relaxed and efficient way that gives us the sound and the expression that we want to convey, this is good technique. The whole point of it is to not have an impediment between us and the music. Good technique is constantly adaptive, constantly responding to the unique demands of every single moment. To only teach technique as one correct way of playing can be highly counterproductive. What I teach are solid approaches and strategies to good technique. For example, just one small example, in a recent video that I uploaded on YouTube, I spoke about the concept of levers and fulcrums, and here's a brief clip from that. We also have other levers, like as well as our wrists going up and down, our wrists can also rotate. So if I want to play with my thumb, I could do that with my wrist, just the up and down. I could do that. I could do that from the elbow joint, or I could actually rotate onto it. And that's a whole different lever as well to rotate. So the Taubman technique is all about rotation, but I taught rotation for years before I heard of Taubman, because a lot of the time it is the laziest, most efficient way of getting the sound that you want. So, like I was saying a little bit in the previous video, in our Protestant work ethic culture, people can be very much pulled into the belief that something like being a concert pianist is all about the hard work and the technique. Like being a concert pianist is just a question of hard work and building amazing technique. And yeah, although you obviously need that to be a concert technique, this is not actually the core of what being a concert pianist is. It's about artistry and expression. And for most amateur learners, fixating on technique rather than the goal of musicality and expression is usually completely counterproductive. And this is why so many people just fall apart under pressure when we learn in this way. It's the smallest bit of nerves and it falls apart. So again, I am not saying to not learn technique. The technique is really important once you know what you want to do with it. And to all the people who really didn't like the tennis analogy, it's worth looking at one of the most replicated findings in all of sports psychology, which is that external focus on a goal beats thinking about the physical technique of how we move our body to achieve that goal. As I said in the video, this does not mean that we don't work on our technique, but that we have to make sure we know how to focus on our goal when it matters. In music, the goal is the sound along with the expression and the feeling. Just purely focusing on technique, so much of the research in sports psychology shows that on its own is counterproductive. Adult amateurs have a strong tendency to hyperfixate already just on the mechanics than the goal, especially under pressure. So just like in sports, it can very much help us musicians, especially adult amateur musicians, to work on the inner game of playing, what we pay attention to and how we pay attention to it. And like in meditation, it is not enough just to have an intellectual grasp of these mental strategies. It's a skill that we need to practice deeply and regularly. And also, quite a few comments talked about not getting to the point, such as, "Hi, new viewer here. You have a lovely manner, but I've watched for 11 minutes and you've barely said anything. Just telling people to go and watch this or that other video. Life's too short, sorry." Okay, thanks, I guess. Agreed. I was like that last time. It took time to learn not to waste time. Get to the point, God Lord. And this video is from a psychiatric hospital for patients. So, to kind of address that a little bit, yes, as I said, I'm not the best person at making short videos, but I do want to point out something that I've noticed in quite a few of my students. In my experience, the no bullshit students who just want me to spoon feed them magic bullet technical things that would instantly transform their playing, with little patience for beginning to explore the more nuanced psychological parts of playing, they tend to be the most stiff and tense, unmusical players with not much sense of flow in their playing. That's just how it is. The students with curiosity, openness, and patience to concepts that are harder to explain, the subtle, non-binary, paradoxical experiences that are hard to put into words. These students make by far the most rapid progress, not only in their musicality, but in their technique as well. And those are most of my students. So I will be talking more in future videos about the hard findings in neuroscience that back up this approach, the importance of curiosity, openness, and patience, that this makes hard, provable differences in how quickly you pick up new skills. So please do feel free to leave a comment, whether positive or negative. Nice comments are always appreciated, and negative, respectful comments are fine, as I do like healthy debate, as I've said in some of my previous videos. So as I said in my last video, I do have some space in my online studio for students. If you're interested, please do contact me. There will be a link in the description below. If you'd like to support the channel, please do like and subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified when I release more videos. So thanks for tuning in. Now go do some more practice or go watch more of my YouTube videos, and goodbye. Take care.